Okay, I think I have to click manually go live. All right, we figured it out at least now. Okay. And then how do we go to a stream? We're figuring this out in real time.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go.
I hear an echo from your side.
From my side,
Yep. Or somebody else on the end, I think.
I think it might be bit if you're
Okay, I'm
using
gonna use
loudspeakers.
what I think happened is I had my headphones set up, and it was coming in through my headphones, and now for whatever reason it's coming in through my monitor. So I'm gonna switch things over. I'll be 1 sec. I won't be to hear you guys.
Cool.
Somebody say something. Let me see if it's coming through properly.
Go.
Test. All right. Okay, now we work through some of the glitches, but I'm still getting some feedback.
Yeah, I'm gonna just fix this. This is on my end, I think. I think it switched whenever we entered the live call for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think you will have to use the mic or speaker option to change output.
Yeah, it's not letting me change it for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. That said, I can always mute and then unmute as you guys are answering questions as not to hold anything up.
Yeah, we can do that. We are live on Twitch and YouTube.
Fantastic.
You can try rejoining the room if you want to.
Sure, let me do that. It's the same email that you sent me a bit back, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Cool. So I think most things are working now. Wait, David, I don't know if you're being recorded.
How do I record?
Actually, maybe not. Maybe only I have to record. Okay. I think because we do see it live on YouTube. I see you. So
Okay.
I think we're good. I think only I have to record. Let's just verify. Yeah, both of us can be seen. Cool. This is it. This is a podcast. Water cooler time.
Hey, that should be working just fine now.
Yep, I can hear you well.
Fantastic. Sorry about that, guys.
It's all good.
All good. I'm gonna turn down your mic a bit, dude.
Sounds good. My AirPods are too crazy.
Awesome. Well, we can get started, I guess. Maybe we want to intro the podcast and like why we're doing this, and yeah, just kind of explain where we're at.
Yeah, you want to do that, Ash?
Yeah, I can explain the podcast, or but if you want to give more like a elegant, like high level summary of like your thoughts on like why we think this would be cool.
Yeah, I guess one of the greatest things about the podcast, we've talked a lot about increasing our mind share or getting closer to the center of the mind share. The podcast is just another way for us to have a voice, right? another way for us to talk about things that are happening, talk about things happening within the studio, within crypto, within the world, whatever. But also just to get closer to the center of the mind share in our space, and I guess find more ways to relate with the people that we're always interacting with. But in addition, I guess put a bit of a face to a name for us all. Eventually, people will see my face, and one day they'll learn my name, I suppose. No, but we will, put a face to a name to Proof of Beauty, and people will get to know you guys, get to know us, and learn what we're all about. And this podcast just happens to be, an excellent format for doing that, and I'm sure we can all agree on that. So, is there anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess go ahead, Dave.
I mean, the plan is to do this for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Something that people can tune into on a Friday. Plan is just to have a consistent way just for people to reach out to us, for us to interface with the community. We sometimes are very silent, building things behind the scenes, and this is just a great way for us to hopefully humanize the studio, right?
Yeah, and
in
on
a
the
good way.
opposite side, it's also good for us to kind of just meet regularly and keep the momentum going, kind of like, just shoot the shit and like live brainstorm. This is basically going to be meetings for us as well, essentially, and we're recording them. So that way we kind of are two birds, one stone, and get content out there, and
Mm-hmm.
we can also kind of relax and think through some stuff, talk through some stuff together, because we rarely get to do that, just us three. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yesterday me and Dave were just chatting about Zagabond spectacle, like different stuff that happened in crypto Twitter. We can talk about that, or we can talk
Well, no,
about
let's
maybe
let's use some time to be a little selfish and talk about ourselves here.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And given if people really want to hear our take, we'll provide it. But I'm, I'm going to shamelessly shill ourselves on our own podcast. I'll say that much.
Yeah. So we can go through like what we're currently working on, or
well, didn't Bitwizard want to like ask away a few questions and everything structured around the lore of what we are, how we got here, and that's a great first podcast.
I mean, to kick things off, I mean, I guess like we all know that Proof of Beauty pretty much started with Hash, but maybe we can talk a little bit about the inspiration behind Hash and where the initial idea came from, how it was conceptualized, what that process looked like, and how that evolved into how you see the studio today. And maybe Dave, you can start with this one.
Yeah. I feel like every time I tell the origin story, it changes a little bit. That makes it harder and harder for me to remember the truth and the fact at this point.
Right.
But Hash was thought of, at least conceived, as an idea for a few years ago. But it was largely inspired by my kind of like personal wanting to be able to effectively visualize Ethereum's history, the rich history that happens, the crazy crap that happened. Then this was, I want to say, just when DeFi summer started to pick up, and so wanted to build a book. That was kind of like, well, if I'm going to build a book, I don't have art to put in the book. I can only put like text. So it became, I got to build Hash first, and then Hash, started to grow, started to become a place where it soon became the studio. So yeah, like it is still one of our premier projects that we have supported historically through seasons, through new versions of stuff. So yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of go up to the present and then let Ash kind of cover the future. So yeah, Ash.
Yeah.
What's coming forward?
Yeah, I guess like things were really successful with season 0 Genesis. Had a linear price mechanism, right, for minting. And season 1 kind of dragged throughout 2021, and now we got to season 2 We just want to keep the momentum on. But I think we're really excited for next season, which is going to be Bitcoin support, new art, and all that stuff. Um, yeah, like right now, I think we're in the process of basically like how do we re-kick the flywheel of hash, get things going, and I think there's a lot of history out there. There's like a lot of ETH history is already like the OG history has been minted. We definitely see that like Bitcoin makes a lot of sense for next year. I'm gonna mute that.
Oh, he's out again. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're not going anywhere with hash. I think it's gonna be fun. We're at our third season and we are qualifiably speaking one of the original NFTs bullish market era projects at that point. We were created and kind of blew up during that early movement. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited for what we're gonna do. Going to a different chain is gonna be entirely exciting, and it's gonna be a lot of exciting challenges for us to figure out. But yeah.
We could talk about like a little bit about like what's our overall idea with hash, because I think it's unlike any other project in terms of it's not like, all right, here's a set of tokens, and here's a roadmap of like different things we're gonna do. It's like we spent kind of early 2022 getting hash to just like a featured consistent spot, essentially, fixing some of the things we learned from the previous seasons in terms of like, okay, how do we, if someone adds a title and description to a Ethereum TX, how do we know that's accurate, right? That's not a straightforward answer to that question. So we pivoted to comment system, and we don't think there's many other features left in hash that make sense. And so we just want to focus on basically expansion and just essentially history is a socially constructed concept, right? And so there's much more of a focus now on platformnomics and getting people to actually use hash for what it can be, right? It can be a very useful tool to essentially track all kinds of different data, because we made the comment system, you can write anything you want, embed tweets, add NFTs and stuff, point to other TXs. Now that may not be obvious why we did all those things, there's no clear roadmap for hash. It's just a utility that can exist for as long as we need it to. So I think realizing that vision is going to be interesting for the rest of this year. Seeing how season 2 closes out, and then progressing to Bitcoin. So hopefully the Bitcoin is kind of enabling Bitcoin support is what kind of reignites a lot of the history hunting.
Right. Yeah. What I would imagine is that, and I mean, I hope this happens, that once we release Bitcoin support for hash, that we move closer towards the center of the mindshare, given especially that Ethereum is kind of its own ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem is older and more mature. And I think it'd be a really unique way to bridge the two different ecosystems and get some people who maybe aren't currently excited about NFTs on Ethereum excited about these historical NFTs related to Bitcoin. And so, yeah, I think hash is really, really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah. And to even add to that, I always thought that hash has and will continue to be a very uniting force around crypto, where tribalism runs rampant everywhere, where the universality of the project is just history, right? And we know that, to equality, like you come here to do the same thing as everybody else, to find history. And we've seen communities bleed together, bleed through to each other, and maybe doing Bitcoin can also help reduce some of the tribalism, in the sense that I think Ethereum has its own high horse, Bitcoin has its own high horse that to a degree feels very segregated, and maybe hash can help do what it has done, and hopefully bring people who are from the Bitcoin world over or Ethereum people that has had Bitcoin history or started with Bitcoin have a way of kind of revisiting how they got to this place, right?
Right.
So I'm personally the most excited about not just the amount of history available on Bitcoin, but like Hash has this weird ability to just make crypto a tribe, right? And not just
Right.
specific sectors of crypto. So I hope Hash in the future can continue to do that. And Bitcoin history, I think, would be a big step in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really cool if Bitcoin Hash NFTs or a lot of people's first NFTs. I think that's it would be a huge measure of our success. Essentially, again, right? It's like I mean, Hash is so much more unique than a normal PFP project or even a generative art project. I
Yep.
think we need to play on that pretty heavy as we could continue to go forward.
I've always found Hash to be very personal, right? Like the fact that I could go mint my first transaction or go mint a transaction related to some rug that impacted me or whatever it may be. That personal aspect of the NFT of Hash is really unique to Hash. Like, I don't know about you guys, maybe you can comment on this as well, but as a collector myself, I haven't really come across a lot of NFTs that invoke like a personal emotion behind the art itself. But for example, my first decentralized transaction, I mean, that art piece means a lot to me. It stands and it represents a whole bunch of different things that I stand for, including values, getting into the Web3 space and whatever. And I'm really excited for, as you were saying, for like some of these Bitcoin guys to kind of like get re-excited and come back and maybe see their first transactions, or maybe they're going through Satoshi's first transactions, and that reignites some of the excitement. And I'm just really excited to see where this goes based on that personal and emotional aspect of Hash.
Yeah, and before I forget, shout out to a features. If you put your own address in the search bar on Hash, it gives you moments of your own history populated out. So it'll be like your first transaction, your first NFT transfer. So please, if you want to try it, please do. It's exciting, it's fun, and I think it's it really kind of can hopefully relate to how much emphasis we do have to making minting.
An experience.
Right. Yeah, and your experience, not nobody else's, but yours,
yeah.
right? And I think that's very important, right? Like from the beginning, we were very deliberate. We never did block number based history, and certainly there's been other projects that's done that, and we at this point don't have an intent to go into that market. But why we chose transaction, because there's a sender, right? And a sender, there's a destination, right? There's events happening in it. With a blockchain, if you think of with like a block, it's a very plural state of history, right? You have a miner that you don't know who it is. You have 100 transactions in there that you don't know who's sending what, right? So yeah, like it, yeah, it was built from the ground up to be kind of expressive in that way. And we have certainly played around with that. I think people who can remember back to Saga, we did discounted pricing to celebrate just that alone. And I've heard so many stories from folks and like, hey, like my partner or my family does not know or does not care for NFTs at all. But if they were to care, Hash seems like their first step into this world, right? Where it feels sensible. It feels in the sense that it's something that can really invoke something beyond just a literal PNG, right? I think Hash makes people forget what is the pragmatic quality of an NFT and let it be more ephemeral, right?
And it's very powerful. Especially cool, like with Saga. Nick Johnson, the ENS guy who minted the transfer of ENS to DAO, that was a personal TX. So he minted his own TX, his own transaction.
Oh wow!
And that was the highest last sale. What, maybe like 45 ETH, 40, I think. 40 ETH, yeah, right. Which is insane, right? So I think that it's kind of incredible that he just kind of immediately wanted to, have a memento of that moment, of a significant moment. and he put the metadata on chain and all that stuff, um, and then had to accept the sales offer and then donated the revenue to the DAO. So I think we have something really special.
Yeah, this story comes up so much, and it's for me very motivating, and it's certainly a thing for you, Ash, as well. We've had people with the Constitution DAO that has minted their history. We have had other DAOs, other hacks that has impacted themselves. And for me, I don't make history that often as of now, but even like the recent, like somebody dug out my first contract deployment, like that was
Incredible.
a huge, that was 2018, right? Like that's quite a while ago now at this point, and just really brought me back to memory lane. It was like that. It's like, well, I didn't know somebody was gonna take the time to
find that, yeah,
to find that, and yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Zip Skull Kid, Web3 History.eth. Yeah, killing it. Yeah, we miss that. We miss that energy of all those hash hunters, of people finding like crazy stuff like that. I mean, we know it's a quiet market, but I like we said. I mean, we were strong believers. I think this can last, right, throughout market cycles.
Yeah, we have the conviction of it, and Hash deserves it. I think that's more important.
Right.
Like, you can't build a historic project that just dies in like 4 months, right? That just
It's not
so
makes sense.
Yeah, so we built it. It came out. We have iterated upon it. We have realized a lot of our initial vision with V3, our seasons. It's like, the plan one way or another is if the studio's around, we're going to be here to help support and make Hash thrive. Predicated upon whatever things we're doing at the time. May be of other focus, but Hash is going to be around, and like it. I can't wait to see it years from now, seeing people come back to Hash. Like, oh crap, this was a Genesis era transaction that was found, and to kind of feel that loop again, right? Where you're revisiting your own moments, right? Because in its weird, cyclical nature, by minting the history, you made history yourself, right? And so, Hash is just a very nice blank slate, and I think we have given it the best tooling. I would argue for a project that is such a blank slate. The comment system is very powerful. The tag system is very powerful. I think the discoverability right now is, to toot our own horn, is probably on the top echelons.
As good as it can get,
and
we can talk about how it connects maybe to a larger like proof of beauty theme. Right? I mean, your project, Dave. Like, I mean, making Hash kind of initiated that theme, right? For proof of beauty of token experiences. Like, I mean, I think I was having a cool conversation with someone the other day, and like, kind of explain the difference between our mindset of NFTs as a token. An NFT is not a wrapper for art. We don't see it that way. We never really saw it that way. So the token itself is the art and everything it contains, and the creation process, the minting, everything, all of it. And I don't think most people don't even really conceptualize that, especially in the PFP space and the average kind of like an NFT consumer. And
I think what you just said is best experience, not tool. Experience.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Because I have certainly been on podcasts before where they're like, what makes proof of beauty different? And I was like, well, every project we do would not be complete if it wasn't for it being an NFT, right?
Exactly.
The NFT is a critical part of making this piece whole, right? Which, not to say you can't say that about other projects, but if you were to look at it in a very literal sense, NFT tokenomics, token designs are great vehicles of capturing speculative value, right? It's very portable. It uses the internet to translate settlement, right? And to that degree, that's why a lot of folks are minting their art on Foundation, on Zora, or whatever. But we're taking that a step further, right? And yeah, we can. I mean, like to be fair, I mean, yeah, we do challenge ourselves all the time to try to push that needle in a way that is in the proof of media way, right? Like we're not building a NFT fi, we're not building a fractionalizing protocol. That's not what we specialize in. We instead focus mostly on the what do you call it, the issuance and the experience around that, right? And I know that now we've been mostly focused on the issuance part of NFTs, right? But to me, that's like the kid pool, right? Like there's so much more experientially we can do beyond just getting that token to your hand, right? And I like to think some of the stuff that we got planned in the future is going to start cracking that a little bit, you know, like, and I'm very excited to what that means. And I know that there is a lot of projects that are trying to push that like in a gamified way. Now, personally, I'm not too bullish on gamifying your NFT. It feels like putting a Web 2 context, forcefully feeding it into a Web 3 experience, would not to say it doesn't work. It's more just not what we do at the studio, right? So,
Ooh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm wondering if we could take it back for a sec here, and I can ask you a bit about the art production process for Hash, given that the 3 seasons are quite different in art. And just what went into that, and how did you decide on the theme of the art for the different seasons?
Honestly, there's no grand master evil thought to it all. It usually is always a reflection of my current state of mind, of what I'm visually curious about. And so I kind of just build things up that I find curious. I think, Ash, you know that during the Saga time, I was rushing out the Saga art because we were hitting a deadline that we wanted to hit, and I was like, "Oh crap, we gotta materialize something out of nowhere," and so that was a little bit of a rush. Genesis was started first with the art. I made that to learn WebGL at the time, and then kind of just sat on it for a few months, and I was like, "Oh wait, I can maybe use this in the context of Hash." Hunt was I just wanted to build stuff that I was really inspired by, like commercial design in textiles, and wanted to do something inspired by that. And I think that's our policy with our art. Like, yes, there is a thematic link to the quality of what we're doing, and that makes sense. But like, you know, we build things out of the whim of our appreciation for it, and I know that next season when it will be Ash's baby, I'm certain to be surprised and whatever that would be.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But I mean, Hunt, you did like somehow give Hunt the tribal feel to it, even though like just from the word Hunt, you know, like we came up with that title for that season like kind of way beforehand. And then you kind of just like, I think you subconsciously worked it in.
Yeah, like I've certainly had people ask me, it's like, why like this happens, and why did it happen? Did you design for us? Like, mate, like like it was completely whimsical. It was and yeah, so Hunt was fun. Honestly, for me, it was very fun.
A technical question around Hunt. How did you guys get the like NGMI and the WAGMI and all those different things into the art? How does that happen on a technical level? Maybe not all the details, but I'm curious.
Well, for one, that was a pain in the butt. Ash have definitely felt my frustration and my wrath related to that.
Unicode.
For one, it's Unicode based. It's an SVG. But the problem with an SVG and text, and certainly if anybody has played with like MS Paint or anything, it's like text doesn't really work the way you want it to work because there's like random spaces above it, below it, on the side, and so putting in like we're all gonna make it was really hard because the text just didn't want to fit in there because there was just random spaces everywhere. So I like honestly there's days where I just simply dedicated to making 5 letters fit in the box that I wanted to fit in. And I tried every concoction of SVG science to figure it out, and somehow, luckily, it came together at the last minute where we needed it to come out the door. And I was very close to saying, we're not doing this texture. Whatever. I was like, if we're going to Unicode, we're not going to do it like this. This was painful, and that was completely not caught me off guard. Like, I built the whole thing and was like, oh yeah, the text part, that's gonna be easy. That's gonna be like 10 minutes worth of work. It ended up being like 48 hours of work, and so yeah. And frankly, I don't remember what I did. Like, I just slapped. It was
together.
Just slapped enough things together, and it looked presentable. It's like, okay.
You were changing the encoding, right? Basically for the SVG, like how it encoded the text.
Yeah, there was so much little things, and then if you have an SVG loaded into an iframe, then an iframe loaded into somewhere else, it just has a lot of weird inconsistencies. And if you are a front end dev, you know that just is a very hairy problem space. So yeah, if we're gonna do Unicode again, we're not doing it like that. That's for certain. We'll do it better, and now we know. Right?
So how do we make the transition from creating a tool that is historically motivated to working on a social currency like London Token and creating that whole accident? Maybe you can go into that.
It's adequate. You called it an accident.
Yeah.
Again, it was an accident. Like, I don't know if Ash can remember. I think I literally just had a call with you one day where just like everything just collapsed in my head and it made sense.
Yeah,
like, this was the way to do it. And I was like,
totally.
Yeah, it was completely off. I was like, we gotta do it. It's like, this is literally a once in my life.
This is like 2 weeks out before the block numbers announced. Maybe not even 2 weeks.
This was about 2 to a month out, and we're like, this is gonna be a pain if we're gonna have to do it, but we gotta do it. Like, this is something like, if you don't do it, I'm gonna regret this going to the grave, right? Like you don't get an opportunity with a hard fork like this. So, well, to be fair, the concept of that, the idea of, I guess, creating things via gas price was pre-conceptualized in another name for a very long time, right? Like, it was on our Notion for a while. It was called Mint, yeah. But frankly, for one, the Mint idea wasn't complete. It just was a stub of a concept. But two, and more importantly, and something that I think really speaks to how we do things in the studio, the Mint idea just was technically cool, but that was it. Like, it didn't have a reason to exist. It didn't have a story to tell. And then when London came around and it was manipulating gas price, it was like, shit, that is the story that Mint is meant to tell. And
right.
So that soon became the London thing. And the original concept of Mint was not to even have a social currency. It was just you put a gas price and that dictated the rarity of your NFT. But for one,
it's difficult.
We couldn't make an NFT fast enough. So we needed something to stopgap it a little bit. So hence the social currency, part one. But two was, we thought the social currency being social could grow more than an NFT could. So yeah. It was also, we never did a ERC20 before, and we are a token experience studio, right? We're not an NFT studio, strictly speaking. So what better to tell the world that any kind of fungibility standard we're there to play with it, right? I mean, at this point,
and people are minted.
Yeah,
and people minted, and it was pretty cool to see that. Watch the London token contract and like people just spamming it with trying to, especially at nighttime when the gas price is low, and just trying to like rake in, like they're just trying to collect tokens like for no reason too. We didn't announce. You didn't explain anything basically.
It was actually funny.
So go ahead, Dave. Yeah, it's like that whimsical energy. And that to me is like true to the form of what like to a degree. That's how Hash started as well. It was just enough things were laying around. And I was just like, what am I doing with my life? I got to build this, right? And luckily we hit a good market stride, and then here we are. But I'm thinking about like ABF, about stuff that Ash is working on, even the merge, and how we're approaching the merge.
Yeah,
it is. We play to the whimsicality of it all. and
But people haven't seen our final form, or we're not even close to that yet.
no,
Not even
You know?
no,
close.
no,
Yeah, we're not
no.
even close. I mean, this is like I think we were fucking around basically for 2020, 2021. Now
Yeah,
we're kind of like realizing what we actually are. Like the whole token experience thing, I think takes a while for us to even like get into our bones
Right.
fully of like what can that really mean.
yeah. And I know that internally, I keep on hammering this idea that like learning the proof of beauty way is like a very intangible skill, and I say that not just in reflection of others, but also myself. Like I think if we were to ask a younger version during the Hash Genesis era, totally different state of mind when it comes to doing things the proof of beauty way, right?
Right.
Which I think has a quality of just
Because you have to
great.
remember, like we were engineer, like we were just normal dudes before, you know.
Right.
We're just normal engineers, like doing and like building products. Like that's what we love to do, and like our
Yeah,
passion. And we're going 180 degrees, and
yeah,
it takes time, kind of, for even us to be that person, be like what we want to be.
yeah,
But
and
we have a lot of. I think we have really solid ideas where we're cooking now that
yeah. I
kind of
mean,
tie
like
together. Yeah,
our problem isn't we don't have ideas.
yeah,
We don't have a shortage of ideas. We do have maybe not a shortage, but we are very picky about what ideas come to form.
Right.
As it's a well, for one, there's not a lot of people at the studio, so we can't just
yeah.
do everything
Do
we want to
everything.
do. But for point two is kind of in reflection of London is we need a story to tell. Like we need a. It can't just be a technically
Yeah,
brilliant thing. It needs to make a. It has to say something
Mm-hmm.
about our world or the outer world, looking at our world, right? Like I've always been very hammering. It's like we need to build critique. That's art to
yes.
me. Is not just technical brilliance, which I my personal not critique but frustration with some modern like the modern field of generative art is um they're all visually impressive, but and abstract art has a place, and I've loved abstract art, but I think art needs to tell stories and have lore, and um, yeah, like we intend to do that, right? Um, and so like ABF has a story to tell.
Right.
Reaper does. The Merge certainly does. Other projects behind certainly does. Doing Bitcoin history, duh, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, and um, I'd rather sit on a concept
Because
than release it.
like we could have, I mean, technically we could have always done PFPs or just normal generative art projects this entire time, right? Um, why didn't we? So I mean, that was never. I think that was never really in our interest, right? Just to
Mm-hmm.
create a token for token's sake and to sell something just because you can sell something. Um, that's not why. That's not why we quit our jobs. That's not why
Yeah,
we started this thing.
yeah, and I want to also say is as a studio, we're just not equipped to support a PFP, both passion, intellectually, resource wise. If a PFP does blow up, we're not a team equipped to want to give out roadmaps to do regular community stuff. It's like
Right.
it's just not how our
Yeah,
brain is wired. So like I stayed away from wanting us to do PFPs out of just the merits that like yeah like if we want to do a PFP company, I would have not have structured studio. We would not have structured the studio the way that we have structured it. And two is we would not have structured the community as the way we have done it, right? And there's um, and we would also need a lot more external help, right?
Right.
To be able to produce the visual quality of a PFP. Because we're not just gonna do a shitty PFP with a Fiverr artist, right? We would do it the proper way, right? But it's not a battle I intend for us to fight in and probably lose. um, so
Right. Short-term
yeah,
victory, but burn out your reputation in the long term, right?
yeah, and
yeah, yeah, something like that. Most
Yeah.
part.
You see a lot of people launching PFP project after PFP project, sometimes within days of each other, right?
yeah,
And And
I mean, there's a reason why they're anonymous, right? Like,
oh
it
yeah,
just
big time.
burner
But
phones,
any
guys.
A-list player is going to look at that, and 2-3 years from now, when that person wants to finally start getting serious about the space, it's going to be pretty hard for them to break into it or re-break into it because they've kind of burned their reputation. And we see this happen time and time again, where somebody who has a sketchy history tries to conceal that, and they go work with a project, and then that history comes out, and the project
Yeah.
falls apart around council culture, essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like I kind of look at this whole like state of mind. Like if you were to reflect upon it deeply, it's a reflection of organizations behind a lot of these projects and the teams behind them, and how they model themselves. And honestly, as a studio, I've personally always looked up to like YouTube studios from way back to now, where they're still living, they're so strong.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked back to, we've consistently talked about movie studios, right? I don't think a lot of organizations in the NFT world think or model ourselves in those ways. Certainly, some are maybe close to what we think of, but they actualize it in a very capital intensive way. Where for us, it's a lot more, I guess, passion driven and derives out of the full independence of our abilities to just do what we want to do and not hold ourselves anchored to a previous context. But like to a degree, like oh God, what was the name of it? The one with the comics, the punk comic one. I forgot the name.
Okay, it's Punk Comics, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a studio behind them.
The one with Beanie.
Is Beanie still there? Pixel Vault. Is Beanie still there?
I don't know if Beanie's still there.
I thought he was canceled to hell. That guy.
I mean, kind of. You think that, but then the guy just like shows up again. It's like I'm never quitting.
But yeah, like I'm not going to speak on the merits of them because I don't know enough. But there is other studios that create IPs, right? That have their own role models, but we like to think we're very different. And also, we don't strictly have a platformnomic perspective of things. Like there are studios that kind of rinse and repeat a formula. We are a little bit more bespoke about it. Not to say we won't build platformnomic designs, right? But if we're doing it, it's because we want to, and we have we think it's
like
cool,
a reason
right?
to exist, right? I mean, I would say we're pretty self-aware given our backgrounds and our healthy dose of skepticism towards things. I mean, I think a lot of people do forget that Wikipedia has existed for all these years, decades, and has never had anything to do with blockchains or Web3, right? So it's not the. And I think it's easy to get blinded by ideas, especially with a rampant investment opportunity and speculation, right?
Right.
As long as we have like a good buffer and we're self-aware of these concepts, even during crazy bull cycles, being able to like take a step back and be, all right, what's actually going on here? As long as we have that discipline, I think we'll stand the test of time. Hopefully.
Yeah. Above everything else, we're gonna outlive every other studio.
Right.
That's the goal and that's the plan, and not just outlive them, but thrive in any market condition. Because we try to not bound ourselves to a specific thing.
Right.
I know that we've kind of had a flair for the history, but I'm looking at our future projects. They're not historic, but they kind of all feel like there is like an overarching kind of theme to it. Not a really big thing, but there's a theme. And I feel like in a year from now, we're gonna have a new theme that we're gonna try to. That is a reflection of our conversations internally on the podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's definitely a quote, but like someone has said it before of like art is just a conversation with everyone that came before you. It's we're going through that process in our own way, right? As we are ourself intrigued by new ideas and discover new things. Like that's what we like. At least I talk about movies a lot because that's my true passion beyond all the computer stuff. So I think it's us slowly drawing from that and figuring out what the hell's going on, and then differentiating and building stuff. And yeah,
Maybe on that note, we could talk a little bit about A24 and POC as inspiration for, some of the creative IPs that we're working on. Maybe Ash, you can start with that, given your love for
I
movies.
yeah, I mean, I definitely have some funny stuff to say about A24. So it's interesting, first of all, that we are even talking about A24, because how many production studios does anyone even know the name of? And there's a lot of them, right? And they're always in the
Right.
intro credits of every movie. So it's not like we haven't seen them before. But why is it like what is about A24 is like the meme has caught on, and they've been doing this for a long time. And we had a great discussion about it, I think, during one of our calls. Is like people talk about A24 movies as if they have a thing. There's nothing good. There's nothing in common between any of the movies if you think about it.
Right.
They're just good, other than being good, right?
Right.
So what does that mean? Is like people they have done a very good job of building their brand to be brandless, and I think that's a very fascinating concept that's not as appreciated as it could be. And there's a lot of learning, like, a lot of lessons for us to take from that. And that I mean that's my thing on A24 is like that's
Yeah.
really what I love about them. And it's great to see their success, but people are mistaking their success as in they have strategy and a brand. That's not really what's going on. They're just taking bold risks and they're putting money down. Putting money where their mouth is. So yeah,
Right. I love this quote that I saw about A24 that said that the A24 house style is that it doesn't have a house style. I'm like,
exactly.
that's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. To really add to that, it really, yeah. I've always gotten an impression with the PAX and the A24s is it's not ran by a committee, and that's that energy where it like there's like projects that they would back that like I just don't feel like any other film studio would have given the weight of it. Um, but the quality of the idea, like if you were to like scrape away all the analytics, all the market trends in its entirety, it's a good artistic piece, right? And I think at least a big part of our thesis is there's always a receptive audience to this, right? And we've shaped ourselves as an operation where we were not like looking at like buzzwords and keywords and things like and mapping ourselves to specifically have to do that. Um we'll be bold. Like we're gonna do shit that like if it doesn't make me like scared about why we're doing it or make me feel like this is so dumb, then I don't think we should be kind
yeah,
of doing it, to be
yeah,
honest.
Right.
Like I
Love that.
and like yeah, like Ash, like we both know like how much we are protective of this quality of the studio, right? Like we will do everything in our power to help make it an independent studio, right? Our quality of being able to produce works that make sense for our capabilities as a studio, right? But three is like, yeah, we don't dictate our like that's what yeah, we don't do PFPs. We haven't done a lot of these things. We do have plans to do things that are on chain art, but we don't strictly just do that because it's cool. Like we
Right.
have a very necessitated reason, ends to a mean, well, it means to an end that
yeah.
that enables for us. And um I also think this is also where I think I've been really excited about the podcast is I think with so many anonymous teams out there, um, you either paint them in this very like villainous, like they're like a mastermind, and they're trying to figure out the most tactical way to rug pull you. Which again, like, is that wrong? I don't know. Like they're anonymous, right? Like I can flip a
Yeah,
coin
I
and can't
mean,
tell you what it, right? But
Right.
there's this perspective that they're like you're just waiting for one day for your ass to be like fucked, right? Like you're just waiting for that day, right? But like for us, like but the honest reality with a lot of studios, and I think the studios that will last in this business is we honestly like 70% of our decisions are like half baked and we made
yeah,
them and they worked. Like a few of our decisions are kind of more whimsical, but like this is where we kind of are a intuition driven studio, right? We do things based off of what we think can do well and we try our best to make it work. And I think our passion really comes off on project, and I think that's what people also appreciate. So I think also having a podcast to be able to tell the world that like we're not Master Evil plan. We don't have a rule book sitting here saying like this is how we get this or that by doing this, right? Like London came out of nowhere. So did kind of Hash. ABF to a degree came out of nowhere. Reaper also came out of nowhere. The merge is the only thing that kind of like had a reason.
Yeah, it has a plan. Yeah.
Right. Project after the Reaper, like after merge, also to a degree came out of nowhere. Right. Like
right.
And they're inspired by our own lives in many aspects, right? Our own observations and our own like gripes, I guess you could say, with things. And we definitely have gripes, right?
Yeah, and we're obviously excited about learning from these projects. We are tactical to a degree, but like again, like I look at like the Bored Apes, I look at all the PFP projects, even Art Blocks to a degree. It's like how much of this was Master Evilly planned, and how much was this like the right time, the right person, in the right moment, right? And this market still thrives on that, right? But to a degree is if you do that consistently and you do it with a degree of empathy and also a degree of honesty, I think people will appreciate that in the long term. I think that's in part where Pac really kind of stands apart is he's an OG of the internet, right? Like that allowed him to build himself up. And I'm certain there's controversy around his project all the time, but I think there's a truth to his legacy, right? And I think to a degree, not that I am very agreeable with people, but like he's been doing that thing of making daily renders for a very freaking long time, and I respect that. And I think we want to build that legacy, and we've been building it, right? We've been here since the early, like I think when Bored Ape kind of was starting to come out. This was the Hash Mask era. That's what I remember. That we started to come out as a studio, right? So, I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember what my home run was with this whole point, so I'm not gonna say that because I don't remember what I was gonna go to. But like the idea is just, I want people to know that we do things because we love doing them, but that's usually it.
So,
I mean,
would you guys agree that Proof of Beauty Studio is a value-based studio, be it the value of experimentation, innovation, or whatever it may be, the creative process itself?
I think it values the artistry, the arena a lot, in the sense that, I mean, I think to a degree, both like everybody within the studio, we have to step into a world where most people are spectators, and we kind of have to go out there and to a degree we create projects that are usually an extension of ourselves, right? And to a degree, I have to say it's not easy. Not just at an emotional level, but strategically, right? Like how do you get something to go to market, right? That's not easy, and I've certainly learned along the way. But I think as a studio, I pride myself to say that we need to be able to value creators that can and dare to do that. But more importantly to me is a creator that goes in, gets bloodied up, comes out and say, hell, that was fun. Let's do that again and continue, right? And I think if we value that, the production of what this person performs in the arena, like I really, frankly, could not care too much in the long run. But we want to be in a place where you don't want to come out of an arena feeling so battered that you don't want to ever do it again. And you just want to be a spectator because there's just too many spectators in crypto, right? Not enough creators and good creators, I think, who really put it all on the line, right? And so, I feel like that was my take, but I know Ash probably has a take on this too.
Yeah, go ahead, Ash.
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
I guess I was just interrupted. My thought was kind of interrupted there. So I'm almost forgetting what the question was for a second. But no, I was just thinking, forgetting what I asked, guys. But off of what Dave was saying, I asked him, or I asked you guys, if you guys actually remember the question, if it was a value-based studio or not, if you would consider Proof of Beauty Studio as a value-based studio. And I'll get to my question to Dave after.
Well, I did not answer that question at all. I just realized
value. Yeah, value-based studio. It's like, well, it depends on like what you think about what is like what is value, I guess. You know,
I
right? It's
guess
like
I'm thinking
sometimes,
more
yeah,
emotionally, like your personal values. No, sorry to interrupt, but just to add to
yeah.
it, like yeah.
That's even so. That's exactly I would say is a differentiator. Is like maybe most people are probably thinking about like economics of things. Like, okay, what's like a good way to get revenues? Like, what would be a good store of value, as I say, and then all these things, right? But I mean, we've never really held ourselves accountable to those standards in many ways, right? Like that's a fundamental premise of hash is that every TX is not equal, right? Some TXs are
Right.
more important than the others, right? And um, London Gift kind of like demonstrated that in a different way, but I think going forward we have a lot of new ideas about like what that means. But like, for example, I could say is like, so our my own like personal values, like I'm a big fan of Bitcoin Cash, right? Like most people would not talk about that or even say that. Like um
Mm-hmm.
and if we were gonna add BTC support to hash, I'll probably also add BCH support because why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and And the question is like, okay, then why do that? And it's a question, right? And I think it's important to me that I add it, and that's the reason. That's really the answer to it. There's no other answer beyond that. And then you can kind of discover for yourself why I'm interested in BCH. We can talk about that and stuff. But that's part of the art in many ways, right?
Yep,
And so
100%.
it's not like we're saying like one is more like we're not saying like obviously BCH, right? Or like we're not placing
Mm-hmm.
value judgments anywhere. We're demonstrating our own values.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I have a random question, just getting back to the hash thing. I was wondering if anybody, and this is just changing topic. We'll get back to what we were talking about in a sec here, but I'm wondering if anybody's ever minted the hash transaction for Proof of Beauty's conception.
I did.
You
Okay,
did?
yeah.
Okay,
I
nice.
think
I'm
that
curious
is
what the.
literally the first hash.
Oh,
First, yeah.
awesome. Yeah, because I was just thinking to myself, like, I wonder what the date is on that. Like, what date the
I
studio
honestly
was
remember. I don't even
conceptualized.
remember which wallet
The
it is
title
in.
or what title it is.
I don't remember because, gosh, the first 10 transactions, I may have given it to somebody. I honestly don't remember what I did with that one because that is.
Yeah.
I remember very specific. That was the first transaction.
First POV.
I think it was the first. Well, it's in the top 10. The first 10. I want to say I gifted. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could probably dig it up if we looked it up, but
Um.
Yeah.
you sent me one. You sent me one in February. I remember that. That was my
Yeah.
first NFT.
I mean, I at the time, I was kind of also just indirectly using hash myself to kind of give folks that has helped me along the way in my crypto career. I
Okay. Yeah.
built other stuff before on the side, and they didn't, work out to the success of the hash project, but um, there was people that supported me along those ways, so I gave them a lot of hashes. Then I gave the very first trade on Matcha, which I've worked on Matcha. Ash worked on the
Yeah.
Matcha that product. I gave that to our engineering lead or our engineering manager. I gave some other transactions to some other people, but I stayed away personally from all the big history because I wanted other people to find it, and I just kind of minted things that for me I wanted to give other people that hopefully was personal. So
Yeah.
yeah,
What if I recall correctly? Wasn't the Genesis mint price something like 1 ETH and then 0.725 or 0.325 or something like that for a personal?
Genesis started at 0.05 for the first X amount of transactions or first
Yeah.
mints. I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
how many mints, maybe 1,000 mints, and
When
then
did
it
it
started
stop at?
growing.
Do you remember when it turned off at?
2,555.
And then what price wasn't it at like 0.7 at that point? Like
No, it was one
Yeah,
point
something.
something.
it was 1 point something? Really?
Yeah, I'm doing the napkin math right now. It was 0.05
Yeah.
for the first 1,000, and then it grew by 0.001. Was
Okay.
that is that 1 ETH? I guess somewhere around the 1 ETH mark, right? But yeah, I mean, like, I mean, honestly, I'm gonna reflect upon this linear price things. Like, would I do it again? Half.
Yeah.
The FOMO mechanic was kind of crazy, and it created desired effects. But like, I'm not one for creating cash grab price mechanics. The linear mechanic was designed in the beginning as a way to make people deliberate about minting a hash. Like, they're not just YOLO minting
Right.
like a whole block's worth of hashes, because the price would enforce that you can't just mint a joke of a transaction, right? And the original design was like, if it was linear pricing, I was just like, if I get 3 mints a month, I can pay my rent, eat food, and stay alive. That was my goal. That was the
Right.
design pattern of it. That's why it was linear minting. Was that was hopefully allowed the project to sustain my life, and undesired, or not undesired, but surprisingly,
Yeah.
it became a massive FOMO flywheel that
Mhm.
I completely was not. I was not kind of expecting it in any way, and it did very very well. But then in Saga we did a flat price model,
Mhm.
which I think also because it was it was Genesis, right? It was the first batch of history. I mean, the original Genesis was uncapped in supply. Like, it was actually designed in a way where it just ran perpetually, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And it just literally kept on increasing price. But then I was like, yeah, that is unsustainable. Like,
But
eventually there's
I
just gonna be a
mean,
price freeze because this is too expensive.
you
But
can discount the app you built to the initial version of Hash it was
Okay.
a beautifully unique app in and of itself, actually. Like, way different than most UI experiences and completely above the bar for any NFT project at the time, I would say. So
I
I
think for
mean,
that
like,
era,
incredible,
definitely,
yeah,
yeah. For that era, where my competitor was like a hash mask that had a
yeah,
mint button on like
Right.
what it looks like a WordPress website. Um,
Before ETH took off as well,
yeah.
right? Like ETH was still kicking in the $300, $400, $500 range or
no, it
something
was.
crazy like that.
I remember it
No,
was around the 1500. It was around the
yeah,
1500.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's right
1500
before the
range, yeah,
2K mark, right? And that was
Yeah.
still stirring, right? Like
Right.
um, and like in reflection, I think Saga did really well. Like it
yeah.
for
All
one,
things
the revenue
considered,
was
yeah,
good,
yeah,
but two was the pricing mechanic pushed the behavior we wanted to see in Saga, which was people collecting personal history, people still doing the big history stuff, right? But there was actually a lot of personal history being collected, and that's what we wanted to see, right? And it did what it wanted to do. And Hunt, we kind of took a step back and said, let's do a more minimalist design where we just put one price, take it, whatever makes my life easier to
yeah.
build
We're
it,
focusing on content, yeah, this time around.
right? And
So I
so
mean, it is kind of a little bit sad that we had to revert back to standard UI design for Hash, because that first version was so unique in every aspect. But I think the strategy is pretty clear. So we need content for each TX.
yeah, I mean, like the Hunt UI was just unsustainable. I mean, not the Hunt, the Genesis
The
UI.
Genesis UI, yeah,
It,
Mhm.
it was not designed to tell stories. It was. I still like
designed to
it,
look cool.
but
Yeah,
it wasn't designed to have seasons. It wasn't designed to have this or that. It was literally just what it was then. So Hash V3 definitely demanded a little bit of a rework of the thought of the whole system. So
What inspired that original system? Kind of connecting back to, I guess, what we were talking about earlier.
well, I mean, I'm a front end dev by heart. So if I was gonna build a minting experience, I demanded of myself that it better not be just a fucking button.
Right.
And so this was also me coming off of my matcha like first stint, and matcha was eye opening for me experientially. I learned so much from my team, both technically and also other means. So I just felt really inspired to build a DApp that really pushed what a DApp can do. Like, the original design concept was actually for Hash to feel like a Polaroid, where you got like a Polaroid animation that kind of like rolls out your
Interesting.
transaction hash, and then it's like black, and then you gotta like shake it with a cursor, and then it slowly becomes form. But then I was like, one, I was too lazy to do that. But two is that's way too fucking slow. Like you have to wait 40 seconds to see the freaking hash. Like, that's dumb.
Yeah, no doubt.
So indirectly, you can still see in the original Genesis, there was cards, there were floating cards everywhere.
Yeah.
That was still kind of inspired by physicality of postcards or Polaroids. But I felt like that was kind of like meeting my ambitions in the middle, where I thought it was
the
good
UI
enough. And
very much felt like a snapshot in time, right? Where you see that center art piece, and it's like first and foremost the main thing. The hash, the TX hash is in the background, huge bold text and cards floating around. It felt like a snapshot. It felt like every part of that word, and so I think that was definitely like a masterpiece of yours in terms of UI design. I think for both
that's my
of us,
peak. I haven't hit that. I haven't hit that ever since. I think that was my limit. I was like, not to say I can't. I don't think I can't do it. It's just like I don't have enough of an interest in building those super cool like DApp websites. Like I think like London kind of hit a nice
opposite
implementation
direction
for me.
Exactly.
Right? Which was absurdly brutal, right? Like it.
Yeah.
I had a spec design in Figma that was a lot more crazy, that like really had an interaction, but then halfway through I just wasn't feeling it, and it had so much, also no time, and also it didn't communicate the technical aspects of this project. And I was like, what if it's just a white paper? What if the UI is just a white paper? I was like, that allows me to be lazy, right? Allows me just to exposition dump on you guys, right? And so that's where the London UI came through, and Publico, ABF are also UIs born out of laziness. But to that degree, like, will we produce projects that have very sleek, I think, eye-opening UIs? Probably. I don't see us not doing that. We're capable of doing that, and if a project, I think, experientially should get that, then
exactly. I mean, that's your expertise, right? I mean, we have the advantage there, our expertise being UI, where we can create, really brutal but sleek experiences around things, and we can ratchet up if we need to. We can ratchet down if we need to. I mean, right now we're in a brutalist mode out of laziness and development hours, but
also I could definitely see projects need the brutalism.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't say that we're just doing it out of laziness. We are lazy, but like
stylistically, it makes sense for the things we're doing. But I can definitely foresee at some point we'll have probably a more complex idea that warrants, like a masterpiece for the process for us to go through of designing it.
I mean, like, if you to think about the dev cycle of an IP, right? Like of a project, it's kind of sits on marinating, where we're just building it up. Once it feels like, okay, this is something we want to build, the protocol really doesn't take too much time to build. That actually is a fairly condensed, dependent to the design. The DApp at this point is where you can either spend a week or 2 weeks or spend 2 months building. That's where there's a sliding scale of time, and that's dependent to what you need to do to get your stories told across, told across to the community, right? And for a degree, some of our project ideas just demand a different kind of DApp requirement, but also too is we have a lot of pre-built code systems that we can just bake into our newest dApps, so that has made our time a lot more narrow when it comes to dev cycles. But really for us, actually, the bulk of the hard work is actually the go-to-market, I think, where you got to take an idea that was in your head or two people's heads and then start communicating it, get people to do what you want them to do, right? And that is a lot of time and quite a hard bit of work, because you don't.
It's a context switch for sure, right? It's like we're designing stuff, we're coding some stuff, and then all of a sudden now you got to start thinking about, okay, how am I going to tweet it out? How do you have that kind of on the cuff type of active communication with your idea, and everything that goes along with it.
That's where I see kind of the marketing and the branding and the more biz development side of things kind of fits in, kind of capping on the original idea and trying to help you guys best communicate the idea itself. And like you said, there's usually an action on the other side. Like there's something we want people to do, be it create something or mint something or whatever that is. And there's a science to getting people to do that action. In marketing, they just call it conversions, right? And so that is a tricky part for every business.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think like discoverability is like definitely a big question too. It's like what are we actually kind of going for? So are we talking to existing audience? Like when we're trying to reach out to new audiences, like what do we even really
Mhm.
want to happen? Do we want them to be like, oh, we have a new NFTs, like let me go check out this new thing? Or do we want them to truly be intrigued in some aspects? Because I think it's important for us always, or me and Dave always talk about, or I always talk about with Dave, my first experience
Yeah.
discovering hash, because it's so vivid to me. The first time I discovered
Yeah.
it, it was like just fully sold, right? Like, and how do I replicate that is always a question I ask myself, and it's not straightforward because I didn't see Dave tweeting out something about hash or anything like that. I kind of was just investigating myself, like trying to figure out. I just joined ZeroX. I was trying to
Mhm.
learn about the team. I saw Dave, and he was on my team, and so I was checking each other's Twitter profile, and
Mhm.
I was like, oh, he's working on something called Hash. What the fuck is that? Check out the website. Okay, website's dope as fuck.
Yep.
I clicked some button. I think it was like I'm feeling lucky. Yeah, you had a I'm feeling lucky button originally, and then I realized it was an Ethereum TX hash,
Right.
and then the design of everything and the art, and it kind of just like blew me away instantly. So that kind of cycle of hooking someone is not straightforward,
No, it's
especially
not.
from a tweet. Yeah, and it's not straightforward to think about it even as a conversion because I didn't mint, but he
Right.
converted me. Right? Do you see what I'm
Right.
saying? So
Right.
I didn't mint, but Dave converted me in that second. So
I went through a similar thing where I came across it, and then shortly after I came across Hash, it appeared on Chico Crypto's YouTube channel, and I was like,
yeah.
"Okay, this is legit. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna go mint those Hash transactions that I was looking at," kind of thing. But it's actually cool to hear that was your first NFT, Ash, because I feel like Hash. It's a perfect starting place for people. Several times I've introduced the concept of an NFT to friends by showing them Hash, because I feel like it helps them understand the concept of an NFT a little bit more, and it helps them even understand that the art itself isn't the token. The token is
Yeah.
the art and
Is it totally
comprises
It's
that
not just a JPEG,
metadata.
right?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And more people need to understand that the token just houses the metadata, and that metadata can appear in whatever form you program it to. And Hash is just like the best way to show people that, because you can see exactly what metadata was inputted in order to create your randomly generated output. And that's just like a really straightforward, beautiful process that I feel like it's just an amazing tool. And I to this day, I'm still such a fan of Hash. It's just an awesome tool.
Yeah, I mean, to speak on this, that like I feel like NFTs from my own journey from way back, getting into the 721 world. It this like to a degree, you can even argue smart contracts or even the blockchain in general. If you were to rationally explain it to most people, it just doesn't resonate. Like,
Right.
especially to an American or a person of a first world country where
Yeah. Digital money, like
value
yeah.
is so safe, right?
Mhm.
It you never had to question a lot of things, especially in the current modernity, like sans COVID inflation. The
Mhm.
US, like US dollar, the euro, the yen or whatever, like they've been, you never questioned or doubted maybe deeply what these things are really, right? And um, you know, to a degree, um, I still strongly believe that like crypto does its best growth through just feeling it over like sitting somebody down. It's like, all right, this is what an NFT is. All right, it's like a thing that points to a metadata thing, but it's actually not just that. It's more, but it's not that. And like it gets so confusing if you go through the pragmatics, because it really isn't about the pragmatics. It's an, right, like smart contracts to a degree. Like that was one of the concepts where when I was in school and trying to teach that to people, people couldn't really wrap their head. Why is it smart, right? Like, and also to a degree, I don't think smart contract is the best way to call it.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But then when you start using like compound finance or using like Uniswap or using other things, you're like, oh, okay, like this is kind of just like a means to an end that has some nice attributes. For one, it doesn't shut down on banking hours, right? It 24/7. It doesn't care about your credit score or whatever. There's like certainly a lot of reasons, but like at the end of the day, like NFTs, same. Like we need to like kind of like show the world what it's capable of, and what we're currently showing, I think, is drawing a very negative perspective because we're really just reinforcing the whole. It's a JPEG.
Problems. Yeah.
Like meme, right? It's like a PFP, it's a JPEG, right?
Mhm.
And to a degree, I do think that if you were to look at the general crypto memenomics of NFTs, people are like, no, it's not. It's like a brand, but also you get to interact in this metaverse. I'm like, well, to me, that also doesn't sound like a great pitch because we also, to be fair, I don't think public media interprets the metaverse in a very positive light. Um,
No.
Thank
Yeah.
you to Mark
Yeah.
Zuckerberg, right? But two is also like I don't have a very positive view of the metaverse, right? Because it's just not something I personally find very interesting. And also we do operate in a market with interactive experiences from the likes of like Activision or from other from EA that are very
Yeah.
very toxic. Like if you think about the pricing mechanics, about how they extract money out of your wallet as a player, or even Fortnite. Um, and I'm not very happy that the next best story that we want to tell them is like, no, we can build a decentralized Fortnite. Like, I don't think that's going to sell it on people, right? Like, if you really want to sell it, I think there's something else, and I don't know what it else is. But I certainly think that there is a better story because we've all here experienced that different story through our own work at the studio, right? Now, so yeah, I'm confident we can do it. I just don't know what that would mean at a broader scale, right? And um, yeah,
I
this
mean,
is I
this
think
like I would say this uncertainty of like the market versus like what we're actually trying to do is, I mean, something definitely personal to me. Even before doing the whole NFT thing, is like I worked at BitPay, and I mean the Bitcoin white paper says electronic P2P cash, which no one uses it like that, right? And so
Right, yeah.
it's important to remember that, I think, because it gives us a lot of clarity on like what the hell is even going on right now. It's like we're just kind of I don't know, yeah, just scratching the surface, right, of what's actually possible. So
yeah, I've been like asked quite a bit, like, what do you think the future of NFTs are? And like, I give the same answer that I gave when DeFi wasn't even a thing. We don't know.
yeah,
Right.
It's going to exist in a form that I think it's both all of our jobs to help define as a studio, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
part of our living to help shape what an NFT is in the future. But two is, um, I hate fortune tellers in this business, and I don't
Right.
intend to be one because who knew AMMs was going to be the thing? Like, well, yeah, like way back before we
Yeah.
had AMMs. Uh, um, to be fair, like the initial we kind of conceptualized what an AMM was in DeFi for a while. Vitalik wrote a forum post about it, and then Hayden Adams, built it out into a beta, right? And then whatever that blew up. But before that, even AMMs were used in the traditional financial world for like very low market cap products. Like for example, like earthquake insurance stocks, options for San
yep,
Francisco, right, for the
Right.
year of XYZ, right? Like we had AMMs back in the day running on CeFi to help facilitate those markets because there's nobody's gonna market make that thing, right? So like to that principle, it's like NFT is gonna go through that cycle. We're just gonna figure out like
yeah,
like that thing and this thing, put it together. That's where shit goes crazy.
yeah,
And I think I'm very bullish that we as a studio will be part of the history books when it comes to
Mhm.
getting us there, right? With what NFTs are. But please, to the love of God, I hope that the market doesn't call it NFTs 2.0 or whatever the hell, because there's like a DeFi 2.0 that was kind of buzzing around. It just better be just NFTs. Like,
So would NFT 1.0 technically just be ownership of data, and 2.0 would be this concept that hasn't yet been realized, as you're talking about?
Yeah, and I don't think this concept translates into pragmatics strictly, where like the code of a NFT radically changes. I don't think that happens. I think it's more there's adjustments on views, on perspective, on teams, on what gets funded and what doesn't get funded that will radically reshape what an NFT can do, right? And I think there's going to be a day where where you're going to say, "What can an NFT do for me?" That question itself is wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Hmm.
so maybe a good example actually to think about is so it's funny that we even use the word NFT if you think about it, right? For the average person, why is the marketing companies and crypto Twitter using the term NFT to communicate a concept to the average person? And then they ask, what the fuck does NFT mean, right?
No doubt.
Non-fungible
Right.
token, right? And then they're like, okay, what the fuck does non-fungible mean? Then you have to explain to them what fungible means. So I
Fungibility.
think, I mean, the acronym is very similar, we could say, to the dot-com boom of URL. URL is a concept mostly knows, right? But when we say URL, no one has any connotation to it. It's just URL. When is NFT going to get to the point, like when is that going to happen essentially, where it's like we get enough saturation where it's again greenfield in that aspect. I don't know when that's going to happen, but our job is to make that happen, I would say, because we're
I
in the
think
beginning
about it
part of
as
it.
well, like with what you're saying, like how many people really know how website protocols run or how the internet protocols run? Like very few, and everybody uses them. And I envision maybe that, maybe people don't need to know what an NFT is in order to benefit from it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right. And the most seamless experience that we can provide would be to get people using NFTs without them realizing they're using NFTs, right?
I mean, the more stuck up we are about an NFT just being a data pointer doing metadata, the more we're actually going back in progress.
Right.
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
because again, the pragmatics do not speak about the quality of the whole thing experientially, right? And yeah, so um, yeah, to me, it's like a little bit of like a set theory thing where you're like, it's not what it is today. What it actually is, like I don't know. That's like I just know
Yeah.
that within the
Yeah.
metaphorical Venn diagram, I just know this circle is not it, which is what we have right now. Um, um, and I think it's for us to help. It's wherever it goes to in the future. We as creators have to be as mind as be has to be as open minded as we can be about where it can go. Right.
Right.
If we're really stuck up
Yeah.
about something, which I think the current market is really stuck up about where the destination of NFTs are, um, we're probably going to miss the shot. And I say that taking on personal lessons from the ICO era of projects. Um, and yeah, so I do at times feel really frustrated that I feel like the NFT space feels very not open minded about what it is itself. Um, and I like to think I hope that as a studio we change that through our work, through our podcast, and yeah, yeah, it really tilts me sometimes. Where it's
Right.
like,
Yeah. And I mean, maybe this is a side effect due to like massive amount of like essentially non-technical people are entering into a very technical space essentially in its infancy. Um, it's hard to say. Like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. But
I mean, like to be
Right.
fair, like
yeah,
like 2 years ago, OpenSea was barely scraping by, right? Like now
yeah,
look at them, right? Like those guys are literally like printing change, like
You're right.
out of the system with a 2.5% rate, right? And the market has come, and not to deny bull market things, but bull market does have positive stuff. Like it
Mm-hmm.
brings a lot of talent, it brings a lot of intrigue, brings money to support teams.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, maybe that money does not strictly translate to success in this current generation. But usually, that money reflects upon institutional like buildup of knowledge and lessons that we can build up on time upon. Right, like to think like of the OG ICO era, there's only really Xerx, and like Maker. but I don't even know if Maker's an ICO coin at this point, that
Right.
kind of exists, that still stands today as pillars. But like in reflection, Compound was kind of like post that era. They didn't even have a token in the beginning, right? So is Uniswap. So is like, and then like if you think about it, what died in that era? Like Augur, prediction markets never took off,
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah.
right?
Yeah. Which is a big
Like,
deal, a huge deal, right?
yeah,
Especially
and
for the cypherpunks.
there was so many other like relayer style product, like Dharma, right? Like Dharma in original
Right.
version is so different than what it is today, and now it's acquired by OpenSea, right? Like,
Even Pool Token that did.
oh
not
yeah. Pool Token in its original iteration where it was like a weekend hack, and then like I remember Instadap way back in the day,
Right.
DeFi Saver. There's all of these kind of things that were birthed post era, and the thing that lived, which is only really like I think genuinely you can count on your hands too. But the key part is I think the generation of DeFi that came after these ICO, they were built on the shoulders of the ICO era, right? Because the ICO era kind of also indirectly said that's not a good way to do this.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that. And then we saw a lot of projects come out with no token until they did this whole yield farming thing, and then now we have
Right.
the current yield. But yield farming is such a direct reaction to this era, and I think that this bull market we're going to have a very divisive reaction to this current bull market, to the last bull market in NFT, or the first bull market in NFTs, and that's going to really shape the policy of the future, and that's going to have a bull market, and then we're going to have a new policy shape, like right now, right? We have seen with DeFi 2.0, right? Like
So
it is a huge reaction to DeFi 1.0, right?
I would add to that is like we are kind of definitely in a new era of technology development because there's money tied to it and in the open source aspect, right? It's like I think we're things the dynamics definitely changed because people are rooting for technologies like the way they root for sports teams because they have like a self interest, right? They
You're
can
right.
put an investment down, and it's not we're not kind of seeing the natural like what's it called survival of the fittest type thing happen, right? With protocol design or anything like that. Um, so it is weird. I mean, like it's like at some point, especially as technology, I think a lot of the people in the space who are technical will need to take a step back and look at what's actually going on. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, Bitcoin's a money protocol, but like if you actually look at it, it's just fancy PGP encryption. That's really all that's going on.
You're right. Yeah.
Well, how you use that is up to you, and they're just happen to use it for money at this point, right? And so there's so much we're just at like literally this is like what better analogy in time is like we're the tip of the iceberg in terms of
Right.
what's possible and how it can develop out, and then we have a very critical role in my opinion to play in that happening.
Right. Yeah, you're so right. Like this is something I see a lot, especially within the Ethereum ecosystem. Like a lot of the ETH Maxi group is pretty young. Like a lot of the people in the space today are new, and I've realized that there's a general lack of awareness for other projects in general. Like let's say Polkadot and the massive ecosystem being built on Polkadot and Kusama, and that includes a whole like host of different projects that are just incredible advancements off of that original Bitcoin build out and Ethereum. But yeah, it's interesting just to consider the lack of awareness. And I kind of wanted to turn back to this whole concept of DeFi quote unquote 2.0 as we're NFT 2.0 as we're moving in that direction. And if you guys are willing, kind of talk about ABF and what makes ABF a step forward towards that direction instead of being the traditional NFT 1.0, and what differentiates it on the NFT front.
Well, for one, I don't think it's a
Without
step.
giving up.
I don't think it's a step
Yeah.
forward. It's a step in a different direction than every other project on the market,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to be different before we know what forward is. I think that's one big thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
the project is designed and very strong reaction to how generative art NFT organizations produce generative art, and that the fee extraction is pretty high. The go to market and like the equality of value across platforms is startling, right? Like if you, again, art blocks compared to a FX Hash, like, or a GM Studio, right? Like, pricing wise, it's so weird and so different. But at a pragmatic level, they're all still NFTs. They all largely
Right.
abide to the same pragmatic design, and there's nothing that's fundamentally deviated. And um, there's a huge curative force right now that kind of gatekeeps a lot within this market,
Mm-hmm.
and so ABF is built as a thing where one of the big things that we wanted it to be was, for one, was unstoppable,
Mm-hmm.
which you can't really say that, to be honest, with a lot of generative art protocols, with a few exceptions. But this is like genuinely unstoppable because you can't. There's like the art is not even on IPFS. It's not even an API call like art blocks. Two, it is like I like to think about it, like art blocks and all these things, like they take a 10% cut, and if I look at it at a totality, it's like the system is not too novel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we're building ABF to be like we're gonna take the bare bone version of an art blocks and ship it as a project, in the sense that
Right.
it does the job so dang well, and it has such a straight design that nobody should be taking a fee from you as a creator,
Mm-hmm.
right? And nobody should be able to turn your system off, right? And you will own the NFT, self sovereign or whatever. So ABF is in so many ways like a reaction from our side to generative art studio, like productions, or platforms, because we don't do that ourselves, right? We don't go on art blocks and drop art, and we do our things our way. And I think indirectly ABF is also our way of sharing how we do things, which is
Right.
self-sovereign, owned by us,
An experience in and of itself,
an
in the
experience
creation
in
pod.
itself,
Yeah.
right? And share that in a way that feels like crypto, for one, feels different, um, and it's just overall elegant, like in the sense that it has the right memenomics to translate to the broader sphere. So it's a very different step. Now, if that's different step, does really well, I'm certain that we'll see us and maybe the whole collective community react and start learning. Because I do also, to be fair, I think we are in a bearish market where I think there's a lot of honest builders out there and creators that are looking for a different status quo about NFTs. And I think ABF is primed to be a different status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And if people start receiving it really well, I think I hope it spurs almost a small renaissance of creators and thinkers that are going to build NFT art in a way that is a direct reaction to some of the flaws of our current market. So that's me being a little bit more idealistic about it, but at the end of the day, it's completely left field, and that's why we like
Yeah.
it.
Well, yeah, another way, like, analogy I can maybe tie in is like ABF is like the arcade, right? And then we were creating, David's kind of like architecting this arcade of sorts, and the experience is playing the arcade from the creator standpoint, right? So we're creating
Right.
limitations of brain, like you have to write it in BrainFuck. Here's our renderers. You can create your own renderer if you want, but these are the ones that are ready to go. Um, so I mean, it's a contained experience, right? It's not like, I mean, we're changing. It's not just about the generative art, right? It's about the whole thing, right? It's, again, it goes back to the idea of the token being the art itself, not just like
Right.
a wrapper to something pointing to some fancy image.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's gonna be fun. Where I personally just love this idea where, like, anybody could use ABF to create an NFT,
Mhm.
but do you want to? Like, that's the curative
Yeah.
force. It was like,
Yeah.
like I just find that such a like flipping of the formula where everybody wants to be on art blocks to drop in if you're a generative artist, but it takes like 6 months to even get like noticed. I think, or I'm exaggerating obviously,
Right.
because I don't know what they actually are. And then you may get a lucky slim chance that you're actually going to be on the most premier art blocks issuance platform, which is their
Curated.
curated, not
yeah.
right. And then there's their factory or playground, whatever under it.
Yeah.
For us, the problem isn't a lot of people. It's like people that come here. It's like, oh shit, like I can use this, but like, holy fuck, this is a brain fuck, right?
I love
And
that. Yeah.
indirectly, I think the curators who dare to use this will hopefully learn a little bit about themselves, in that it's going to make you deeply reflect on why you create art, because the system just doesn't have the niceties of modern thinking. And I think that the
Yeah.
people who would use it, they
Yeah.
can really be proud that like, hey, like I enjoy the challenge of this, not just like I want to make ends
Yeah.
meet or money to be made. Like there's a
Right.
genuine challenge, and
Yeah.
that challenge is the curation. And yeah, like I mean, I used a
There's a
metaphor yesterday, Ash, right, on the woodworker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'm gonna say it now, and I know Ash is gonna
Yeah.
start tuning me out now. I think of it like a lot of generative artists now, they're all woodworkers, right? Like they all have a table saw, they all have like a bandsaw, they all have a drill press, all powered, right? And it's easy, right? Like if you were to ask one of them to build a table, they probably can, right? Like given that wood is cheap enough, and you process it all, you plane it or whatever, and you produce a piece, right? But then if you were to say as a client, go to them, hey, I want you to build a table, right? But I have a requirement for you. You can only use hand tools, right? You can't use you can't use electricity, right? You can't, but I think if you were to say from 100 woodworkers, I think they could all do it. But I think there's a certain percentile that would say, I want to do it, and I'm freaking excited about that challenge. Because I think I will be a better woodworker. I think it's going to be fun intellectually. I think I'll produce something I'll just not produce in a traditional sense. And I think that's what ABF in many ways is a reaction to. Is right now you can use P5 and create a generative art that's largely pretty good, really easily. But what if I said that, all right, you're going to use a freaking programming language that has literally 8 commands, right? And produce something? Like, I think of the crop of generative artists, there's going to be a few that will step up to the challenge to it. And hopefully they learn something more about themselves and art. And I think that's really exciting to me. That they're really like feels fun and proof of beauty and whatever.
The woodworking analogy is so perfect too for this project, just because I mean the blisters you get from using hand tools and like the slow process and methodical process and like the tuning of everything that you go. Like, 'cause I've done it before. I've done woodworking by hand, and I mean, there's something beautiful about Brainfuck, right? That simplicity of 8 opcodes, even seeing it, the problem solving of counting a number by looping, like all that is like what makes it the experience, and like that. I mean, it's beautiful in many aspects. It's hard to even like talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really cool, right? As a studio, we always say that we're trying to prove it. We're literally called proof of beauty, right? But I think, at least I hope, with every project we have planned, they're gonna prove beauty in blockchain stuff, each in their own way, in a way that you didn't know there was even beauty to be had in that specific context. And I think ABF is going to find the beauty in the creation myth of generative art. And I think the merge, the project after this, other project will all speak to the beauty of whatever aspects. And I'm very, 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 very excited about everything in the forward. I know that ABF is currently the closest on the roadmap, but even everything else. Right.
Both of our upcoming projects are kind of around this idea of work, and I would say that's a kind of an important detail. At least for this, the most immediate releases we have.
about like what you have to do to make the NFT, right?
Right.
Which we live in a world right now where like it's a mint button and it's selecting
Yeah, it's the opposite. It's allow lists, it's tokens, it's everything. Raffle. It's complete opposite of this. So
yeah, and yeah, so it's gonna be like it. I think like and I say this as like as a reaction, right? It's like there's been so much counter reaction, like frustration with like minting systems now, and there's a lot of FOMO. There's just it's really hard to design a great minting experience where gas price doesn't get nuked to all hell, and people within your community are bounded by the gas price and cannot get that NFT, right? So there's been a lot of frustration with that. Like Art Blocks had to do a Dutch auction, like the other land mint from Bored Apes was kind of a shit show with 6,000 plus G-Way gas, right?
Yeah,
There's been so much reaction about like this, just how hard it is to freaking do this, and some people would say like, well, if you want to sell the Braum, build a better contract, right? Which makes sense. There's certainly creators like that. The ERC 721A standard is very much so a reaction to that at a technical level. I think for us, we do answer that call of wanting better things, but we answer it not through technical solutions, but through thought-provoking different things, and it kind of like push the brain a little harder in a different way. Like you would argue London, if you think about it in its totality, the social token, and then you mint a gift, that was kind of a massive minting whitelist process where like you had to be in on early, and if you really wanted to get this token, you could buy the social token on Uniswap, right? If you're too lazy to be part of it. And it was in many ways, I think, not a practical answer to mint systems that we have today, but it was thought provoking, and I hope that it inspired other creators to think harder about things. And I think ABF will do that. Reaper will definitely do. Oh, did I just leak the name?
Reaper, we've already leaked it. Yeah,
Reaper will do that, which is the next project after ABF. We'll do that definitely about other areas of an NFT and its creation myth. But I would like what I say, like, is this sustainable to build and generative art on chain with Brainfuck? Hell no. Like, but we think it would be
point,
right? And that's exactly, that's the point, right? Like, I remember telling my parents, I was like, yeah, there's this language called Brainfuck, and we're gonna use it. And my dad being a electrical engineer, so he knows how to code. He looked at it, I was like, why in any hell did you think this was a good idea? And I was like, so exactly. like that was a reaction we wanted to get out, and so yeah,
I really love that. This kind of allows it is very technical, but it's still very creative, and it allows like a non-technical creative like myself to kind of peer into the project and get really excited about just the creative process itself, which is really, really unique. I wanted to ask just like a theoretical question around Brainfuck. Let's say I had a particular art piece that I generated using P5. Technically, I should be able to create the same piece using Brainfuck, correct? Just that it would be impossibly hard.
No, computational theory. Yes, they're both Turing-complete languages, so technically you can. But economically,
it's very verbose, very verbose.
Right. Yeah. Like, for example, there's no way to add two numbers.
Yeah.
Right, in Brainfuck, because there's no idea of an integer, right? There's like you have to literally for loop
a cell until
a number, adding 1 to it for 200. Like, say you want a number 128, you need to add 128 times to get that number, right? Like, can you do it? Like, sure, right? Like, at a computational theory wise, yes. But in that way, that's where its kind of beauty comes out of, where it's like there's a lot of things you can't do. The things that you can do, for one, I think people will appreciate that it is made with Brainfuck, for one. But two, well, it's also fully on chain, so there is some limitations about on chain stuff. But like, really, if you think about it, it's like I genuinely don't think people would use Brainfuck to do what they are currently doing with generative art. right? And that's exactly the point of it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? The system is designed to be very adaptable. Where I wouldn't be surprised if people start using it to do strictly one-of-one NFTs, where it's so
Right.
hard to write in brainfuck. So then why do you want to do 100 of 100? Because that's just too hard, right? So then I'm just going to create a one-of-one, and maybe this becomes like instead of an art block competitor, it becomes like a foundation competitor, where there's like a world for a one-of-one generative art to thrive. Who
Mm-hmm,
knows, right? Like
mm-hmm.
this protocol is not opinionated enough about that, but how people will shape how they want to use it is all up to the community. Um, and that's why we use brainfuck, right? If we were to just say, hey, you can write Solidity, then holy hell, yeah, you can do anything you want to do with P5, given you're sufficiently motivated. But like a brainfuck demands you to compromise, to think differently, to tilt your eye, get a Dutch tilt, right? Like and revisit a lot of fundamentals that you assume were correct. For example, how do you do trigonometry in brainfuck? Right? Like there's only 8 opcodes. How what is the number pi in brainfuck? You don't have that. Right? Like
Question. Yeah.
there's just so many assumptive thing. Like you don't have a random function as well. Technically,
floating numbers. Yeah, none of that.
Yeah, we don't have floating numbers. They're all bytes, right? So like it goes all the way down to the Turing machine, which is like the most fundamental unit of the computer, right? And you're like saying, okay, now use this. And obviously, we have designed it aggressively to make it actually feasible to use brainfuck, right? Like we're not making you go from scratch with brainfuck, right? We give you a lot of little niceties along the way to make using it semi-practical. But like if you were to go on like the brainfuck Wikipedia, for example, right, the first thing you'll see is pretty much it's an esoteric programming language, which pretty much implies it's a programming language
not to be used. Yeah.
that's literally not to be used. It's all theoretical, right? And we're probably one of the first guys who's going to give it a very legitimate use, right? And that, who knows what's going to happen?
Historic.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and like I can totally see if this thing really blows up, people will start tooling up brainfuck in a way that gives you the niceties of modern languages, where we were all aware of like TypeScript, right? Like there's pretty much iterative versions. Like they could be like a brainfuck Redux language that gives you a lot more versions, and then you can just compile it down to the brainfuck, so it makes ABF a lot more approachable and easy to use. There's ways to do that, right? There's certainly a crap fuckload of, I guess I'm not allowed to swear because the project literally has a swear word in it now. Crap fuckload of potential things. Like I was actually researching for like a half a day. I was like, can I write a JavaScript to brainfuck transcompiler? and I kind of learned it was possible, but like it's a lot of work, a lot of work. And then like you could go into a lot of the more technical stuff. Like what if you use like a LLVM style kind of compiler language design, which goes a lot more into the technical stuff. Like there's ways you can get to making it easier, but that's up to the community. That's not me to. I'm also too lazy to do this kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, can you do P5 stuff? If you do, you will have my eternal respect to produce something like that.
Yeah.
But to this degree, I will say that like computationally, we're not bounded, because they're really limited if you think about it by how much gas you consume in a single ETH call, not an ETH transaction, but in an ETH call. And we're currently operating in a world where it's about 500 million gas, which if you think about it, a single block on Ethereum only has 30 million gas as a block limit. So so pretty much in an ETH call, you could do approximately 10 to 20 times more computation than a single whole block in Ethereum can do right now, right? Which means you could do a lot of stuff. And so I'm certain people will push that limit.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know how it's going to be pushed, but I'm excited to see it.
That's really awesome.
We can talk like maybe a little bit about the lore of like the universe we're trying to build around ABF with like the shaders and the collections themselves, maybe, or.
Oh, sorry. I'm like I completely distracted.
Yeah, I mean, just like
you
so,
want to
like
talk about it?
yeah, it's like we had this. I mean, so okay. First of all, I would say like ABF is like definitely a clean slate for Proof of Beauty, right? It's like we're coming off Hash, we're coming off London. We learned our lessons. We're ready for like the next phase for us as creators. So I mean, we have our own Twitter and all that stuff. Like, I mean, we're trying to uh both. I mean, Dave's more familiar than me, but are familiar with a concept called SPC. Is it special procedure containment procedures, right?
SCP, Secure Contain
SCP,
Protect.
yes, yeah. Secure, contain, protect. Yeah. So, um, I mean, we have some interesting concepts, right? It's like these shaders, the generative art itself is written in Solidity. That's completely independent of BrainFuck. We still need like to create, renderers.
Yeah,
Um,
I want to clarify that because I don't think we've ever shared that in any medium.
yeah,
What we mean by a shader is like you're writing BrainFuck code that produces a a string of bytes, right? And those bytes can be whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we have another contract that reads that bytes in and interprets that into an image, right? And this interpretation process is up to that contract. So a very simple example would be you can give a byte string of just like RGB values, like RGB, 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 right? And if you give that, it literally could be a pixel grid where it just says block one on the top left is going to be the first RGB color, and then the next one, right? But the idea is you write BrainFuck to produce any set of output, and that output is read and interpreted and produced into an image by a system, right? And obviously, you can go full crazy and like we do actually have a shader that literally just prints out your bytes and just does nothing else. It literally just takes your output from a BrainFuck and just gives it back to you as a string. So you technically can produce an SVG with just BrainFuck alone, but like if you dare to do that, power to you, right?
Good
But
luck.
we make it a little easier for you by saying you don't have to do the SVG part. Just give us 256 RGB colors, and we'll give you a nice, pretty looking pixel grid, right? So that's what a shader is. That's a renderer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we made BrainFuck more practical to use to produce on-chain art.
yeah.
But yeah, now
So
go
I mean,
on. I just want to clarify
yeah, I
that.
mean, like due to that structure, there's very clear segregation now of what is actually being developed on, right? So like you can develop the collections, the actual NFT itself, be it BrainFuck, but we still need to create renderers and these shaders. So I mean, we'll be creating the first ones ourselves, written in Solidity, but I mean, we're trying to maybe frame the concept as these things that are kind of naturally occurring in some sort of aspect. Like if you think about it, someone could replicate the terraforms image creation process from scratch that intakes 256 bytes
Mm-hmm.
and make it work, and so that you could have like a terraform like derivative of sort that's powered via BrainFuck. um, but so yeah, we need to create that kind of that natural occurrence of development, and so we're trying to maybe create a universe around why this would make sense, and then like kind of just domino, see what happens basically.
Yeah. Like
Yeah, it's hard to like we haven't even really fully conceptualized like what that means, but we know we
Mm-hmm.
just want to be weird with it. I mean, if anyone's played a game Control or SCP, read those documents.
Right.
ABF is one of those projects better experienced than told what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I say that London was the same case, even though it did a lot of explaining, literally. But like, you would probably just not get it until you click the mint button on the London ERC20 token, and it gave you X amount, right? You're like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense, right? Like, ABF is on that same note, where the more I explain it, the more I confuse myself. So, it's definitely better experienced. But like to that degree, is like, do we have an experience ready? Almost. So yeah, ABF is in the pipes. Very excited about what it's going to be. But we have a lot of just like a lot of work to be done, building out the features for it on the DApp side to make building with brainfuck
Mm-hmm.
kind of enjoyable. Like it is still brainfuck, so yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that you guys shared that a bit about the lore, a bit about building a story and a mystery around Brainfuck, and I think maybe just to direct some of the listeners to SCP. You can look up SCP Foundation or Secure, Contain, Protect, and you'll find different series and different interesting writing that you'll see kind of where we're getting inspiration from and where Dave and Ash are really drawing from. And there is a big internet community built around this. So I would also imagine that within Brainfuck, we're going to attract new users. Maybe somebody who hasn't minted before is going to be really intrigued by the whole universe itself, and
Yeah.
we can draw in a whole new class of artists in some sense. So I'm really excited to see where that goes.
I mean, we kind of like half baked this concept after spending a week together in Chicago, and we kind of like we're just like jamming and thought this could be
story
cool,
of the probability life, dude.
Yeah, I mean, literally, yeah, right.
Everything's
but I mean, I think
until it's baked.
In my opinion, it actually the style of SCP, like weird fractured universe, makes a lot of sense, even as a commentary in itself on like modern day pop culture, right? It's like, what is the Marvel universe? Like these are all movies directed by independent like different directors, different screenwriters. It's like stitched together by this conglomerate, right? It oversees to make sure the lore is sound and solid. But I mean, what's more native to what we're building, a decentralized protocol, than a fractured lore, right? Where each thing is a chance for you to create a story around why it was created and why does it exist, how is it found, all of this, right? And kind of just have fun with it, essentially. Hash is our Iron Man in many aspects, and it's just such a good analogy, in my opinion. And we're still kind of finding our voice, but I think that POB universe is yet to be fully unveiled. Revealed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we haven't gotten to the point where, in your metaphor, we haven't gotten to the Avengers movie yet.
Yeah.
Where I think a lot of people really didn't know what Kevin Feige, the executive producer at MCU, was thinking he wanted to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like
right.
I think he had the idea, but nobody else did. Or assuming the studio inside did, but like it took the Avengers movie. It's like, oh crap! Like you saw Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk,
Thor,
the other people come together, and they're like, oh, we've never seen this before in the movie universe, and we're not there yet. I think there will be a day where people are like, oh crap, what these guys are doing with their projects and how they weave them together, that's the vision. Like you got to feel it, right? So to a degree, like knowing ourselves, we don't even know what that
means
is yet. We'll figure it out. But that's kind of our North Star. Maybe,
but it makes sense as creators, right? It's like we're not trying to force feed a universe. Like it's a universe of ourselves. That's what the projects are, right? The reflections of ourselves. We change over time, and we're stitching together ideas, and they're not fully independent because, of course, not. Why would they, right? And yeah, I think it's a perfect reflection of our creation process, even more so than a traditional movie universe.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome, guys. I feel like we've been on
covered a lot,
an hour and 40 minutes, and the conversation's been great. It flows well for a first podcast, I'd say. I'm sure you guys feel like it's probably pretty easy for us to sustain these kind of conversations and always find awesome things to talk about. And so that's awesome, guys. And I really, even myself, I still appreciate hearing more and more about what inspires you guys, what you guys are working on. I guess the inspiration for each project, but it just helps me understand the vision all that much more. And as you said, Dave, you said every time you explain Hash or explain AVF, sorry, it feels you get a little more confused of what it is, and that's kind of cool too, because you kind of see there's this bigger overarching story, if you will, behind ABF that's still being told. And I think that'd be really cool for people on the outside to recognize that if they stay tuned, they're going to capture the essence of that story, and it's going to be really unique to the space.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a great place to stop for us.
Yeah.
But if we talk too long, we're going to run out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it was great experience overall, I think, going this first time. So next time we'll definitely have it cleaned up.
For the listeners, this is honestly what we do inside when we're not public, is we rant, we talk, we experiment, we evaluate why we do things. So you guys are getting pretty uncuffed from us. Like, we may hide a name or two, but like,
yeah, this is pretty much how the meetings go. So.
Yeah, and this is us. We're not putting a persona on. This is literally us. We shoot the shit. We talk. We crap on some things, but we value other things. So, yeah.
Yeah,
well, right on, guys.
It was a
that
great,
was an
great
awesome
ending.
First podcast, and yeah, are we gonna end it here?
Yeah, let's end it here. I think everyone enjoy your weekend, especially you, Bit.
Yeah, thank you. You guys too.
Good stuff. All right, well, I'll leave it. End it right now.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great.
I need to get more water.